did not try to jump. But, well, good evening, everybody. First, thank you so much, Congressman Cleaver, for that wonderful introduction, for helping me understand pronunciations, because hopefully I won't do something and pronounce things wrong. I want to thank Ashley in particular and the board members of the Missouri Humanities Council. Thank you so much for all the work that you do. Thank you for helping to put this event together. Thank you for Dr. Beatty, who I know had to leave for a different event, and for everyone here at Metropolitan Community College who helped make tonight's event possible, and for providing the refreshments that we had before the event. I also want to say I never do anything at all without the wonderful staff at NEH. And our Director of Congressional Affairs, Allison Scher, is here with me. So I want to thank Allison. If you haven't had a chance to speak to her, you're welcome to come up and talk to us afterwards. But the staff at NEH are absolutely amazing, and I am so happy to be able to work with them. I want to say it is such a pleasure to be with you this evening. And first and foremost, Yat A. My name is Shelly Lowe. Shelly Lowe Yinishe, Bilagana Nishlin, Nanistisha Tachini Bashichin. Balagana dashache do trabaja dashanale lo chantia de nasha do Washington Dishigan. I'm Navajo. I grew up in Ganado, Arizona on the Navajo Reservation. I currently live and work now in Washington, D.C. But I have to say, I've learned today, and I can't say that this is true or not, that this is the first official visit by an NEH chair to the state of Missouri. And I want to say, I'm sorry, not my fault. I feel like that is something that I have come across in a couple of other instances, and I really do hope that in my time at NEH, we have more of an opportunity to visit the places and meet individuals and see communities whose work is so impacted by us, but what we often don't think about and we often don't shine a spotlight on. So congratulations for all of your work here. I do have to say, though, it is very nice to be back in Missouri. This is not my first time in Missouri. You have a beautiful new airport. That was so exciting this morning. I have been in the Kansas City airport many times, during under construction other times. Today was absolutely delightful. Congratulations. That is like amazing. But I have to say, I spent many summers in Missouri. My maternal grandfather grew up as the youngest of four brothers, in a small farmhouse outside of Dexter in southeast Missouri. My mother was born in Poplar Bluff, Missouri. As a small child, she also lived in a farmhouse in Dexter, Missouri. And when I was growing up, my brother and I would spend our summers visiting our grandparents' families here in Missouri and my grandmother's family in Iowa. I would often stay in my cousin's farmhouse, and I would sometimes help my cousin, who was a few years older than me. Early in the morning, she had her farm chores she had to do. Like we would drive, she wasn't old enough yet to drive, but she would drive the truck. We would go open the irrigation lines for the farm. She would mow the lawn, and I would just have to say, I would sit on the back of the ride-on mower while she mowed the lawn. And we would pick raspberries and blackberries from the large bushes that grew on the farm. And I would cherish those special days during our visits every summer when we would order large slabs of barbecue ribs from Dairy King to bring home and have with the fresh sweet corn that was picked that day. As Blaise Pascal said, in difficult times, carry something beautiful in your heart. The summers I spent in Missouri are one of the many beautiful memories I carry with me to this day. But tonight I want to share another memory. In 2019, I was giving a talk at Harvard's Peabody Museum in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And at that time, I was the executive director of the Harvard University Native American program. I remember very distinctly that after my talk, a woman approached me. She was an older Italian woman who had grown up in the Boston area. And she said she'd been to many events at the Peabody before. I didn't know there were still Native American people in this country. Which is, I don't know how do you respond to that? I still haven't figured that out. It wasn't the first time I'd heard this sentiment or this comment or this kind of realization. In fact, it is something I hear again and again and again. Because unfortunately for many people across this country, Native Americans don't exist anymore. Their stories, our stories, are gone. And I mention this because as Ashley spoke about the Roots and Routes film, the video, Si Ojeado, We Are Still Here, we learn about the Remember the Removal bike ride, a nearly 1,000-mile journey along the Trail of Tears, where the Cherokee people in the 1830s were forced off their land to a newly designated Indian territory west of the Mississippi River, a trek that killed 1/4 of the Cherokee population. But the Remember the Removal bike ride, created in 1984, takes cyclists along the Trail of Tears while teaching them about Native history. In the video, trainer Will Chavez remembers one stop on a recent ride, when someone asked him and his fellow riders who they were. When they said they were Cherokee, the man replies, "Cherokees? I thought you were all gone." And it's difficult to put into words how that feels, right? How do you respond to comments like that when your people are forgotten? It's not about a language that is lost or a ceremony that is lost. It's about a forgotten history. It's about a history that has been erased. As chair of the National Endowment for the Humanities, I'm working to change that, to bring forgotten and unknown stories to light, to remember our shared history. Because that, the telling of stories, our stories, is the only way to keep us alive, to remember that we are still here. With Roots and Routes, Missouri Humanities is also doing just that. This year, the Council has focused on the movement of people in and across the state, telling the stories of those who came before us. With roundtables and podcasts and films, the Council is saying these stories are our Missouri stories. At NEH, we also want to help tell those stories. Last month, we announced our latest round of grants, which included an award to Diane Burke at the University of Missouri to host 2 workshops on Kansas City in the Jazz Age and the Great Depression. NEH also awarded 2 grants to the National Blues Museum in St. Louis, one to rehouse their collection of musical instruments, textiles, and artwork, the other to design programs for K-12 teachers about African American history and music in St. Louis. It's projects like these that help us remember where we came from and where we are going. For decades, NEH has supported Native American projects in Missouri. In 1975, NEH awarded a grant to the Nelson Atkins Museum of Art in Kansas City to plan an exhibition on 2,000 years of Native American art. In 2001, Union Station, Kansas City, received an NEH grant to rehouse their material collections that document Native American history and culture. And in 2017, NEH awarded a grant to Joanna Megan Hearn of the University of Missouri to study the history of the first family of Indigenous writers-directors in Hollywood. Taken together, these projects, like so many at NEH, are telling a broader story, an American story. One initiative I'm especially proud of is NEH's new partnership with the Department of the Interior, which helps us to tell the story of federal Indian boarding schools. It is a difficult and at times heartbreaking history, but one we need to remember. Last week, a report came out documenting the 523 federal Indian boarding schools across the country. Between 1819 and the 1970s, the United States implemented policies establishing and supporting these boarding schools around the nation. Their purpose was to culturally assimilate American Indian, Alaska Native, and Native Hawaiian children by forcibly removing them from their families, their communities, their languages, their religions, and their cultural beliefs. While children attended federally funded boarding schools, many endured physical and emotional abuse, and some who died were placed in unmarked graves, never to return home. One survivor remembers the cries of children in his school late into the night. They sobbed and called for their mothers. Soon, and here I quote, he says, they were all wailing in the dark. Those are scars that take decades, even generations to heal. Those are stories that make us uncomfortable, but they are stories that need to be told. As Secretary of the Interior Deb Haaland puts it, federal Indian boarding school policies have impacted every Indigenous person I know. Some are survivors, some are descendants, but we all carry this painful legacy in our hearts and the trauma that these policies and these places have inflicted. It is important to note something about painful histories. They don't just go away. They linger. The scars they create are often passed on from mother to daughter, from grandfather to grandson. And it is time to unearth these stories. It is time to give faces and names to the victims, to the survivors, to our neighbors, to our friends. And as I see it, the first step in addressing this history is to acknowledge it. This was a system designed to separate families, to erase Native languages and cultures, and to dispossess Native people of their land. Today, it is our job to tell the stories of those families, however troubling, because their history is our American history, and until we understand it, we cannot move forward together. I tend to think poets tell these troubling stories best. They weave into verse a feeling we didn't know we had, or didn't know how to express ourselves. They give words to what's deep inside, deep within us, in the darkness, in the stillness. One of my favorite writers and friends is the former U.S. Poet Laureate Joy Harjo of the Muskogee Nation. I was in conversation with her a few weeks ago at the National Book Festival in Washington, D.C., where she spoke beautifully about the role of poetry in our lives. As Joy puts it, poets are messengers. They help us remember who we are. In the late 70s, Joy was attending the Iowa Writers' Workshop. It was one of the coldest winters in Iowa City. As Joy talks about this story, she says she felt especially lost. She says, I felt far away from the familiar. Even my words, my use of language felt distant from me, and I did not know who I was there in that place of flat, rolling lands of cornfields. I could not find my grounding. But then one day she was eating with a friend at a truck stop along Highway 80 when a sense of balance and grace fell over them. For a moment, she says, the journey felt perfect. Joy wrote the poem Grace about that time, and it ends this way. I know there is something larger than the memory of a dispossessed people. We have seen it. When I was an undergraduate, I was introduced to a world of cultures and traditions I had never encountered before. I was able to shadow my mentor as she traveled across the country. And I realized for the first time that I knew what it meant to be Navajo, but I did not know many other Native nations in this country. I soon realized there was so much more for me to learn about the indigenous people in the United States. And I have come to understand, studying the histories of those who are different from us, sitting down with people and hearing their stories, is our work in the humanities. And I think this is very important work. It's not about becoming someone else or adopting another culture as your own. It's not about losing your traditions in place of another. It's about understanding. It's about knowing how someone else moves through the world, because they too are human beings in your life. They too are your neighbors. They too, as Langston Hughes writes, sing America. The Springfield-based poet David Harrison is another writer whose stories are rooted in a deep sense of belonging. His children's books about insects going to school and the life of bullfrogs are alive with meaning. We're all together on this planet, David said in a recent interview, living in parallel universes that sometimes touch and intermingle. About his children's book, After Dark, which tells the story of crickets, cougars, and armadillos after the sun goes down, David says, "Nighttime cloaks their world in secrecy, but that doesn't mean the dark isn't alive." His work is a call to look closely, to listen, to know there is so much more going on than we realize, and that is our work in the humanities. We study, we look closely, we ask questions. After all, that's the only way to learn something new. David's story, Wild Thing, is about a feral cat in the dark, and it reads, "Peering in my windows, shine from the light, living in the shadows, prowling through the night, fending on your own, surviving all alone, wild thing." In the humanities, we seek out the stories that, like wild things, are shining from the light. We listen closely and we ask, who is fending for themselves? Who is surviving all alone? Emily Christie, one of the Cherokee writers on the Remember the Removal bike ride, signed up to honor her ancestors and to pay tribute to the lost. For her, the ride was a reminder that natives are resilient and are still here. That's the power of stories. That's the power of humanities. When we tell a story, we remember a history. We acknowledge a truth. We keep someone alive. We are here. They are here. We say when we tell a story, they have always been here. We have always been here. Thank you so much.